Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lesiak Report, second show, second broadcast of the show on libertymovementradio.com. And no intro today. The one I used last week, I decided to scrap it, and eventually, when the show goes live, we'll have some nice intro music from either some good old classic rock or I'll see maybe some of the there's a good patriotic band out there, big Ron Paul fans, big time patriots, active in the liberty movement. There's a band called Poker Face. Maybe we'll play a hit from that as our opening song. But anyway, welcome to the show. Today is Friday. It is the 22nd of February, 2013. And basically, what I want to talk about today, what I want the show to focus on, is history. A little kind of broadcast, I'd say, but not your average textbook history, not the kind of history that you read in the liberal academia and universities. But that's written and proved by communist professors who basically promote all these ideas and distortions about real, true history. History is essential to knowing our future, to knowing where we're going. As I think it was George Santayana that said, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And that is a very, very astute observation. Those who are who simply won't remember the lessons of history, who don't remember what happened, who don't, see an involvement, all this government oppression that happened, see how socialism, how managed economies, how, when the government basically controls the market, there is no free market, so to speak, government controls all private property. The government, institutes tyrannical progressive taxation, which is in the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, actually, is the progressive income tax. That is a staple of one of the 10 planks by Karl Marx. You see all these things throughout history, and however, when you go to school, history is the one subject because, think about, say, science and math and English, all these other subjects are, essential. You have to work hard and, get a good quality education to succeed in this country. And all of those subjects are great. But when it comes to history, the problem in America is that it's so skewed. It has been completely rewritten. It's been said that the winners write the history. The history is written by the winners, and the losers just have to kind of sit on the sidelines and, wonder how things could have turned out differently. And basically, you see this, with the victors of wars. Countries victorious in wars have generally written a history more favorable towards them. You also see this really in terms of, a big government, a liberal agenda succeeded. All these liberal programs instituted, these, programs based on some communist ideals. And you see that this is reiterated again and again and again in academia. So, what I'm going to do on tonight's broadcast is that I have two books with me. Actually, I do have three, but I'll give you the titles of them. And I will use these books as guidelines for today's broadcast. I know it's kind of an interesting type of broadcast. Pardon me. It's an interesting type of broadcast, but I'm going to focus on true history, and if you want to call it politically incorrect, that's up to you, but this is the true history that they don't teach you in your public government school. First book, everybody here on this network, I'm sure, knows of Thomas Woods. Phenomenal author. He's a great guy. He's a Ron Paul confidant and a phenomenal individual with some phenomenal books. And the book I have a copy. It's actually a New York Times bestseller, and it is called "The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History," published in 2004 by Regnery Publishing. And I'll just read you the quote on the front cover of the book is from Ron Paul. Ron Paul says, "Professor Woods historically rescues real history from the politically correct memory hole. Every American should read this book." And read the book they should. And I've read the book on at least one occasion. It's a very well-written book covering so many different topics essential to getting on a grasp of the true history that is completely skewed by liberal bias in academia, that's skewed by professors who believe a certain ideology, and they let their ideology and their personal beliefs essentially, they create a history that's more based on opinion than actual historical fact. And this is something very, very is something that really needs to be addressed. And so the first book I'll be looking at is The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History by Tom Woods. Second book is called 33 Questions About American History That You're Not Supposed to Act. And it is by Thomas Woods as well. And this is a book 33 questions very relevant to American history that kind of really undermine this liberal bias of history, this kind of distorted view of history that your professors have, and it really provides a true history written by a real historian, and it's not just opinion, it's not skewed, it's not written by people who have a certain agenda to get across. It's written by a real historian. Thomas Woods, very intelligent man, a graduate of Harvard University, and very good writer. Like I said, close Ron Paul associate. And then a third book may or may not get to, depending on the time I have. We only have an hour show. It's called The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War. It's actually part of the Politically Incorrect Guide history, series, the Politically Incorrect Guide series, published by Regnery Publishing. And the book is called, like I said, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War. And some things from the cover. You think you know about the Civil War, but did you know that secession was legal? That the Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single slave? That the South had the moral high ground in the war and the editorial support of the Vatican's own newspaper? That Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis expected slavery to fade away naturally? It pretty much faded naturally in every other country that you saw slavery abolished. A whole multitude of countries, and most of them, if not all of them, abolished it before the United States. Before the United States did, and they did it so peacefully, through statute, through new law, pardon me, and did not do it through a bloody war, a war that spilled so much American blood, 620,000 casualties. I believe that those are military total casualties and all. And so much atrocities committed, and every textbook will tell you, the South, the Confederate States of America, the CSA, they're like a reincarnation of the Third Reich. Well, that's absolute lunacy and that's absolute fallacy. And the book really articulates what the Civil War was really about. It was the war for Southern independence. It was the war of Northern aggression. It was not a civil war. This was Lincoln's war, and Lincoln has the blood of so many Americans on his hand, and he was one of the worst presidents in American history. He was a big government statist, and you know what? He was also racist, and we'll get to Lincoln's racism later on in the program. And here's something from the cover of the Politically Incorrect Guide to the Civil War. If the South had won, we might be able to enjoy holidays in the sunny southern state of Cuba. I'll be sure to try to find that bit in the book and tell you what all that's about. It's written by the best-selling author of Robert E. Lee. on leadership. The guy's name is H.W. Crocker III. So, 3 books I'm looking at today, and I'll be exposing my beloved audience to politically incorrect history. Real history, not the version they teach you in textbooks, you know. Definitely textbooks need to be remade and need to really provide a truly non-opinionated and a truly non-biased, a truly historically accurate account of American history and world history too, but these books really focus on just American history. Before I get into the good stuff, then into really telling you about about so-called, you know, politically incorrect American history, there's some not advertisement, but there's some things I want to plug in before I get into all this great stuff I have planned for you tonight. Sorry. First of all, I'm the campaign manager for David Earl Williams III. He is a Republican candidate for Illinois' 9th Congressional District. He's a Republican candidate. We have been endorsed by LibertyCandidates.com and Gigi Bowman. We have over 2,000 likes on Facebook. We have a Twitter page. We have a YouTube channel and a website that is currently undergoing redevelopment to really enhance it, make it look something along the lines of Justin Amash for Congress website, which very good website, very professionally designed. We're trying to make it look something like that. Right now it's in its infancy stage, the website. But if you go check out David Earl Williams III, and please like the Facebook page, and if you live in Illinois, if you live in the Chicagoland area, please volunteer your time. Please do what you can to promote our candidacy. We hope to be unopposed in the GOP primary. Precedent is in our favor. In 2010, Joel Pollack ran as a Republican in the 9th District. He was unopposed in the GOP primary. So was Tim Wolf in 2012. We're hoping to continue that trend and we're going to face one of the most liberal, progressive, big government statist members of Congress, Jan Schakowsky. You know, she's a Obamanoid, if you will. She supports Obamacare. She was one of 98 representatives to vote against out of the Fed. She is, you know, she's the type of person who speaks to the Democratic Socialists of America. So, you know, you guys remember when Congressman Alan West, talked about famously, according to the media, he talked about 81 members of Congress, the House Progressive Caucus, who were communists. Well, there was some truth to that. Alan West, you know, I don't even agree with him on many issues. You know, I'm more of a libertarian conservative. Alan West, well, he's a neocon, but I do appreciate Alan West for at least standing his ground and, you know, putting some truth out into the public veneer, and really getting across to a lot of people that there are some closeted, and not even so closeted, Congressman Lanny Davis, Chicago Congressman representing a district located in like downtown Chicago, I believe. He accepted a membership card into the Communist Party USA. All right, the one that was founded in 1919, based on the Communist Party of Soviet Russia at the time of the Soviet Union. All right, so basically, David Earl Williams III. The website is www.dew4congress2014.com. Like us on Facebook, follow on Twitter, subscribe on YouTube, and that's the promotion I'm doing for David Earl Williams III. Now, I do have, okay, this might take a little longer than I expected, but I do have one final promotional thing I have to do for a good friend of mine. Okay, so a good friend of mine, a guy by the name of Adam Schalke, is a very astute student of politics, and he has just created his his blog. It's called The American Examiner. It's a great blog. So far, 2 articles on it, and there's also a Facebook page for The American Examiner. And Adam, I disagree with him on some issues, or several issues, because he is more of a kind of a liberal, progressive, a true, genuine progressive. But he does, interestingly enough, he does kind of define himself as a left libertarian. And I kind of, this is kind of, I guess, a divergent topic. I was just supposed to promote the website, but I'll just kind of get into the article because it's interesting because it talks about left libertarianism. What is left-leaning libertarianism? Some people say, well, if you, or this is my kind of view, that if you are not a free market supporter, if you don't believe in the genuine, free, and open market, if you don't subscribe to the tenets of the Austrian School of Economics, Ludwig von Mises, Friedrich A. Hayek, all these other individuals, Lou Rockwell is like the modern torchbearer, I guess, for the Austrian School, you could say. There's not much that makes you a libertarian. Economics are the centerpiece issues, the most important issues of today, of the day, is the economy. And I don't think you're much of a libertarian if you do not see that you cannot be libertarian and also believe that government interventionism in the economy and that Keynesianism works. But Adam, to his credit, has a very interesting and thought-provoking article. And what he says, the article's title is called "Making Progress, or 4 Things That the Democratic Party Needs to Do to Court Libertarian Voters." Okay, and all right. Apologize for that. Okay. And so here's his article, and I'll read excerpts from it. Okay. He calls himself a left libertarian, and he says he's often barraged with questions regarding his ideology. What is a left libertarian? So what he says he believes government works best is the one that inhibits privacy, peace, and civil and economic liberties as much as physically possible, and at the same time striving to create a socially equal society. Well, a socially equal society, come on, no libertarian really supports that. But you know what? Adam does make some pretty fair points later on in the article, so let me move on. Let me down this article. He says, people ask him why isn't he affiliated with the Libertarian Party? And he says he does admire the fervor in which members of the LP oppose excessive military, strive for free society. He doesn't believe in parts of the platform, such as repealing antitrust laws, pretty big parts of the platform, and President Obama's Wall Street regulations, as well as privatized education. He believes that these are necessary for a free society, and he thinks that would harm society rather than benefit it if we did some of these things on the economic area here that would not benefit society. Okay, and then he says he likes to see the Democratic Party absorb more libertarian influence. He wants the Democratic Party to be more successful in courting libertarian-minded voters than the Republican Party is, with the whole infusion of Ron Paul supporters and a strategy of, let's make the Republican Party a more conducive to the ideas of liberty. Let's make it. Let's take it down in a more libertarian direction. Let's try to take over the party. Let's make it a party of liberty rather than a party of the neocons. And so what he says is that the Ron Paul revolution made an impression of him, and that was because of the gaining attention from especially young students of the minimal government, unrestricted civil liberties, and he goes on to say that Democrats should embrace their inner libertarian, and then he goes on, there's 4 steps in which he thinks they should court libertarians. The first one is end the drug war. He says, rightly so, government prohibitions on items or substances are rarely effective in reaching their intended goals. May breed criminals instead. He cites that similarities between the emergence of today's cartels, Mexican drug gangs, and Al Capone and his, whole anti-prohibitionist kind of ring in Chicago in the 1920s. And then he says that cites a poll from the New York Times, a poll by Gallup. 31% of Americans believe that the government was making progress in the war on illegal drugs. And then he goes on to say $20 billion have been sent to curb illegal drugs. And as everyone knows, smoking pot, I certainly don't support it, but I believe that an individual has the right to do so because it is their right, and the government should not tell you what you can put into your body or not. And he just says the drug war, and rightly so, has been ineffective, and he thinks the Democratic Party needs to really hit home with ending the drug war. And his second point, second out of 4 points, it is that make repealing the Patriot Act and the NDA a priority in the Democratic Party. Well, I agree. We've got to repeal the Patriot Act and the whole NDAA. Just strike the whole thing down. He says that it distresses him the National Defense Authorization Act, and mentions, as you all know, it allows for the indefinite detentions of U.S. citizens. And even a certain provision for the assassination of American citizens without any sort of real premeditation. It's just spontaneously done. You saw the 16-year-old, I think it was in 2011, in Yemen, the son of, I believe, Anwar al-Awlaki, a 16-year-old kid from Denver, American citizen, was in Yemen for the summer, assassinated. Well, is that moral? No, of course it's not. And so Adam rightly says that the Patriot Act and the NDAA must be repealed. And he says that by driving the force of repealing or completely restructuring these acts, they need to be repealed, not restructured. Okay, they're not going to make these laws any better if they just add more or tweak these. It's not going to have any difference. He says the Democratic Party can become a grander champion of liberty. All right. Another good point. His third point is reform the military complex and remove all of its excesses. President Kennedy, he quotes Kennedy here. Kennedy said that the basic problems facing the world today are not susceptible to a military solution. Well, that's a pretty good quote. He goes on to say that the problems of the world are not likely to be overcome by sheer military power. And he believes that the Democratic Party needs to promote scaling back defense spending and reform the structure of the military. He says that the budget, for the federal budget of 2013, places more than $500 billion in defense spending, largely on items and weapons that have become irrelevant in modern warfare. He says instead of following Mitt Romney's advice and putting more money into our Navy, the government should do is cut the defense budget in half so that it is only $100 billion ahead of China, which he mentions is the next biggest spender of military-related purchases, and also cut back heavily on the Navy and Army, invest the rest of the budget, he says, towards cyber defense, counterintelligence, stuff like that. And that's his point, that the kind of really scale back the military-industrial complex. That's a good point. But I don't see the Democratic Party moving in that direction at all. Sorry about that, Adam. And number 4, use the federal government as a vehicle for advancing and defending civil liberties. Okay, so what he basically says is that he knows that typical libertarian really does not like the federal government and believes in states' rights. So he says with a closer look that the federal government could be instrumental in protecting civil liberties. And so he wants the federal government to have a key role in protecting civil liberties. He cites LGBT rights for LGBT individuals, women's reproductive rights. Well, I'm pro-life, so but yeah, he does cite gay marriage, abortion, and then he goes on to say something would become generally more reckless in regard southern states, especially, he says, become generally more reckless in regards to racial discrimination and violating civil liberties, all without any type of barriers from the federal government. He thinks that the federal government should be more proactive in defending civil liberties. And, well, okay, I can understand that argument, but then again, I gotta realize the federal government is not going to protect civil liberties. You need states' rights. You need the states to be kind of barrier to the federal government. The Articles of Confederation and I believe it was 1987 or 1981. Sorry, not 1980, 1781. I believe that's when the articles were written, somewhere around that time. basically had a states' rights philosophy. And obviously, in Articles of Confederation, we can't go to exactly that because it was a pretty, really, really loose confederation at the time. But we need to model ourselves more and give states more power. And the intention is good, okay, for Adam, to defense of liberties. Honestly, the federal government should have minimal interference in really anything. The only thing the federal government can really do, according to the Constitution, coin money, provide for the defense of the citizens from foreign powers. That's really pretty much it. Okay, so it took me a little longer than I thought, but Adam is, I guess, what he describes himself as a left-leaning libertarian. What's a prominent example of that? Out of the top of my head, I can think of one, Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel was a senator, I believe, 1969 to 1981 in Alaska. He helped release things like the Pentagon Papers and kind of exposed, what the Watergate, what Nixon and his cronies were up to in that endeavor. And Mike Gravel ran in the 2008 Democratic primaries. He got about a mere 40,000 votes in the whole Democratic primaries. However, in I believe it was March of 2008, that he decided he was going to join the Libertarian Party and seek the Libertarian Party nomination. I think he got about 12% of the vote. He was eliminated on the third round of balloting. There were 6 rounds of balloting for the Libertarian Party. And, Mike Gravel basically, I think, illustrates what Adam is. And Mike Gravel was a social libertarian. A libertarian when it comes to issues of civil liberties, for sure. A libertarian when it comes to issues of foreign policy. However, on the economic sphere, he was really the farthest away from your classical libertarian you can think of. And he was kind of a promoter of big government and of government interference in the economy, of the Keynesianism school of thought. And that's what Adam is promoting. But you know what? Interesting. Left libertarian, certainly an interesting term. I've heard it used before, and it's certainly something that exists. And I wish him luck with his new blog, The American Examiner. Okay, so, it kind of took much longer than I expected, but I don't know how long. Don't have much time. Well, not as much as I hoped for discussing true history. Not your politically correct, distorted, kind of opinionated, liberal, biased account of what happened throughout civilization and throughout the history of mankind. It's all up in this book. And it's a really good book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. Ron Paul recommends it. Paul Craig Roberts, many of you are aware who he is, former U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, he recommends it. Recommended by some other high-profile professors. And it's a very interesting book, and I guess I'll just kind of really get into the book. I'm just going to be kind of using this as a model for my discussion here in terms of PC history and true alternative history. There's a quote in the preface of the book, and it's by Will Rogers, and he says, "The problem in America isn't so much what people don't know. The problem is what people think they know that just ain't so." A really astute observation there, and it goes on to say, "Nowhere is the great humorist observation more apt than the field of American history." And he says there's been drearily predictable cliches in terms of American history. Oh, the Civil War was all about slavery, antitrust laws saved us from wicked big business, FDR got us out of the Depression, so on. Then the book kind of really, it starts with colonial America, pre-Revolutionary War, and it kind of ends at the last leg of the Bill Clinton administration. So, without further ado, let's get into the book. The first kind of chapter really kind of talks about Puritans and how, you know, they were portrayed as what, racist, and how they stole Indian lands, and he goes on to kind of refute that, citing many you know, books and historical documents that he shows that you know, the Puritans have been kind of really portrayed in a more negative light than they actually were. But then chapter 2 is what really starts to interest me, and that's about America's conservative revolution, the Revolutionary War. Okay, so in this introductory page, he says that the American Revolution was not a revolution at all, and he says the colonists were conservatives. They wanted to maintain the rights they enjoyed from tradition and custom. They weren't radicals, they weren't revolutionaries in terms of Karl Marx, Frederick Engels. In Karl Marx, what they wanted to do was completely restructure society, completely destroy the norms, traditions, and culture of society. He wanted to create a completely new society, a model that had never been experimented before in human history. The collectivism, socialism, communism, which, you know, as we know, led to over 100 million deaths in Russia alone. 60 million. These are, you know, not estimates by your liberal academia, but by true, really, you could say, true historians. That many people perished due to communism and the oppressive nature of this ideology. And here's a very important one. The American Revolution was not like the French Revolution. That is key, because as when you really think about it, you know, Ben Franklin, he traveled to France on numerous occasions. So did Thomas Jefferson, and they both had friendly relations with many Frenchmen. I think they viewed it in a favorable light. And I guess, you know, the French Revolution happened in the 1789, the mid, you know, early to mid 1790s, and obviously that came after the Revolution in America, the Revolutionary War. And I think Thomas Jefferson and maybe Ben Franklin, they thought they wanted something really modeled on the Revolution in the Americas, in the 13 colonies. They wanted to see something similar in France. Well, that didn't happen. All right, in France, you saw basically kind of, you know, the monarch was thrown out, traditions and customs were thrown out, and this kind of approach to kind of a collectivist, socialist model, anti-religious model. I mean, you know, when you look at the 13 colonies, you know, obviously there was no decree, you know, saying, oh, you must be a Christian, or, you know, whatever. The wise founding fathers believed in freedom of religion. However, a lot of their views, a lot of what they thought was based on really Christian fundamentals, you know, things preached by Jesus, Ten Commandments. The French Revolution in nature was very anti-religious. They would vandalize the churches, the cathedrals in France. They threw out the monarchy. The monarchy had great support from the church, the Catholic Church, and it kind of started instituting this policy of Jacobinism, which, well, it's you know, very, very destructive, and it's certainly not modeled on the French Revolution. So, you know, as he says, you know, the French Revolution was much like the Russian Revolution, that they were trying to create a new, entirely system of government that really put down the peasantry and kind of completely did away with traditions and norms and customs. What the colonists were trying to do, they were conservatives. They were, I mean, they could be derided as reactionaries by your typical liberal political government AP government professor, but they were conservatives. They wanted to simply restore traditional customs and norms, and their traditional rights they felt were enumerated by God. Okay, and the third chapter in Tom Wood's book, The Constitution. Some big things to kind of discuss here. The framers never said that a black person was only 3/5 of a white person. Complete fallacy. That's a lie. It was actually used for taxation purposes. So, and actually, the bigger states, the states that weren't really slaveholding states, they actually wanted this whole 3/5 proposal, because had every black individual, every slave, been counted as the whole of a white person, that would have given the southern states way more power, way more voting power, way more influence in the newly forming kind of infancy government. And so this was really only used for taxation and voting purposes. It wasn't based on some sort of racist, anti-black, white supremacist ideology. No way, that's not the case. First Amendment allows states to manage religious affairs, and one of the things also here it says in recent decades Congress has abdicated its authority to declare war. Well, we know that the last constitutionally declared war was World War II. Every war since then has been a military action. So maybe like a resolution, the resolution 2002, October of 2002 to enter Iraq, or invade Iraq, occupy that sovereign nation. Well, it wasn't a declaration of war. It was a resolution authorizing military force. There's a clear difference. So that's really a big part of this article. And the Constitution is okay, as kind of like a subhead here, say states, but we get to bold just in case. What does that mean? Well, you hear about how Lincoln said, "Ooh, secession is illegal." Hear about his whole premise. Oh, I am going to do this to save the Union, which was his original plan. It wasn't to free the slaves. It was to preserve this Union. And he was obviously a big government. I'm not going to call him a liberal, Lincoln, who didn't believe in state sovereignty, didn't believe in states' rights, didn't believe in individual rights, believed in kind of collectivism in a kind of big government, top-down structure. And he didn't believe that the South could practice laissez-faire economics, free trade. The South practiced this kind of libertarian free trade with England, other European countries. That's where they got so much of their imports from, was Great Britain. And no wonder that Great Britain, France, I believe, they all even considered sending out troops to help out the Confederate States of America in the 4 or 5 year war in the 1860s against the United States government. And very interesting. Lincoln obviously didn't believe in free trade. He was a protectionist. He believed in tariffs. He wanted to see that all across the board. He could not visualize the concept of state sovereignty. And so with the shots when they rang out in Fort Sumter in April 1861, that was the prelude and the direct precursor to the so-called Civil War, which really, in all honesty, it was the war for Southern independence. It was the war of Northern aggression, but it wasn't a civil war, because a civil war is when two opposing sides fight for control of the same government entity. What happened in the so-called, the misnamed Civil War was that one country was one government was trying to restrict and oppress the people of another government, was invading on their rights, on their constitutional rights, was invading on their whole really quest for freedom and quest for liberty. The Southerners saw Washington, D.C. as not representing their interests, as being completely anti-liberty, and not caring for their interests at all. So they seceded from the Union. Guess what? They had the right to do so. It was enumerated in the Constitution. As I said, Constitution is okay, said the states, but they got to bolt just in case. So, it goes on. It says here that Virginians who were concerned about the possibility that the Union would infringe on their rights of self-government, upon ratification of the Constitution, declared that it reserved the right to secede from the Union. That's directly from a line from Tom Wood's book. Similar things happened in New York, Rhode Island. And it took kind of a while for the Constitution to pass because the Constitution was kind of a little bit more of a centralized kind of structure. It still definitely supported the states' rights at the time, but Articles of Confederation were way more, we could say, friendly towards state sovereignty. That the Constitution kind of made the federal government a little bit more powerful. Still not the overreaching monstrosity it has become today. And this is very, very clear. It was made by people like James Madison that states reserve their right to secede should they feel that the federal government would become oppressive and tyrannical. So you see, Texas secessionists. I watched a kind of a bit on the Daily Show actually yesterday. It was a clip from the Daily Show. And basically, one of the correspondents for the Daily Show went down to Texas and talked about the kind of the Texas secessionist movement. They interviewed the correspondent humorously interviewed a guy named Larry Kilgore. He says, the federal government has become a tyrant, and he believes Texas should secede from the Union. There is a pretty, relatively sizable, you could say, secessionist movement down in Texas to create, a Republic of Texas. Larry Kilgore was a U.S. Senate candidate, got about 19% of the vote in 2008 in the Republican primary. And, he in the interview, that was kind of the big, I guess they titled the clip after what Kilgore said. He equated Lincoln to Hitler. And I think that is a bit of a hyperbole. That's a bit of an exaggeration to equate, Abraham Lincoln with one of the most brutal, second only really to Joseph Stalin, brutal dictators and mass murderers out there, Adolf Hitler. Yeah, but the premise, and they kind of ridiculed them, because the Daily Show, they'll always get these kind of funny quotes and that kind of ridicule the people they are interviewing. If the people they are interviewing have a sort of like a whack job theory or political stance, you could say. It was a funny clip. But anyway, yes, there are secessionist movements. They're not really strong, but there is a secessionist movement in Vermont called the Second Vermont Republic, which was led by Thomas Naylor, but he recently died. He was actually, I guess, kind of a leftist libertarian. So back to Mr. Schalke. There are apparently leftist libertarians out there. I'll have to read up more about that. All right, let's get back to the book. So. The feds must leave the states alone, and goes on to state the First Amendment, goes on to reiterate the Second Amendment, we all know, and then here's a really, really important amendment. We're talking about the Constitution. The chapter 3 of the Political and Guide to U.S. History is called the Constitution. Here's a really, really essential amendment. The subhead here is, just because it's not in the Bill of Rights doesn't mean it's not a right. The Ninth Amendment says, the enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Okay, so, even if it's not specified in the Constitution, that does not mean that the government can infringe on the rights of states. Anything not mentioned in the Constitution as a power that does not have federal government jurisdiction over is reserved to the states exclusively. Very, very important amendment. Constitution is fascinating document, a very important document that's it's been called a living, breathing document by these liberal professors in academia. Well, you know what? A living, breathing document. What does that mean? That we can essentially just change the entire meaning of the Constitution or we're going to ban free speech, or we're going to completely limit the rights of states, or what are we going to do here? And the 10th Amendment really is a little bit more what I was kind of trying to, what I was talking about more relates about to the 10th Amendment, which states the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved for the states respectively or to the people. You know, pretty self-explanatory. And there's a little bit here about war powers, how Congress, quote-unquote, wimps out on its responsibility to declare war. It mentions that every war since the Korean War, under Article 2, Section 2, has been interpreted that the president may act with an essentially free hand in foreign affairs. So that basically under the president's whim, he gets to send men and women into battle without consulting the United States Congress. The framers of the Constitution, founding fathers, meant that once war has been declared, it was that once war was declared. So first Congress declares the war, and then the president, in his capacity as commander-in-chief, directs the war and is kind of, you know, presiding over the war, you could say. So that's definitely an important point. How many of your liberal academia professors will say, you know, that essentially every war since World War II has been an illegal war, has been a war that has not been properly declared by the U.S. Congress, has been a military action, and it is something that the founding fathers, if they were here today, they would be rolling in their graves. You can bet on that. Next chapter, it talks about the principles of '98. I'm not talking about 1998 or any year recently. We're talking about 1798, and providing for the general welfare. You know, there's a clause that says in the Constitution about that providing for the general welfare. Well, that does not mean that the federal government can just spend willy-nilly any money it wants on whatever program it wants. That's not the meaning of the general welfare clause. This is really, really important. Okay, because today's big government status, liberals, even some Republicans, come on, there's so many rhinos out there. So many Republicans in name only who have nothing, bear nothing in close resemblance to the philosophy of liberty, the philosophy of freedom. And so what are they saying? Well, they are saying that, you know, since Congress can provide for, or the federal government can provide for general welfare according to the Constitution, that means we can just spend money on all sorts of projects. The federal government can just, spend money, take taxpayer money, do whatever it wants, you know. Well, this is the kind of argument that you could say that Obamacare is kind of maybe in a way justified. Well, of course it's not justified, but that's what some of the Obamacare supporters could say based on this general welfare clause. Here's a really interesting bit. Okay, an early draft of the Constitution. I'm reading out of Tom Wood's Chapter 4, a book. An early draft of the Constitution started out with the words, "We the states," not "we the people." Again, that shows you, even though the Constitution kind of created a little bit more of a centralized governmental structure than did the Articles of the Confederation, nonetheless, states' rights were instrumental. And if they wanted to start out with "we the states," obviously that was changed. But here's really, really important. And this was an ongoing pressing topic relating to the nullification of, say, Obamacare, relating to the nullification of the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, that you're seeing in states like Virginia, some other states that are kind of taking the initiative and saying, no, we do not want Obamacare. We're going to nullify that statute as states because we have that enumerated right in the Constitution. Here's what it says in the book: granting individual states the power to nullify unconstitutional federal laws was a debate the founders took seriously, and that's what they wanted. They wanted the states to be able to kind of put a check, you know. And this is all in the system of checks and balances. They wanted to be a check on the federal government and the amount of power and the amount of governmental authority it could enforce on the states. They wanted the states to be kind of a buffer against that. You know, here's like a PC myth a little box here in one of the when I go a little bit into this chapter 4 of Tom Wood's book, The Political Inquiry Guide to American History. He says that many historians really portray states' rights as just code words for oppression, for slavery. But historians remind us, the real historians remind us, that of the 5 Virginians who made the greatest intellectual contributions to the strict constructionist interpretation of the Constitution, what that means is, oh no, it's not a living, breathing document. It's exactly what it says it is. To change the Constitution, you need to have a constitutional amendment, which is pretty hard to do. I believe you need at least 9 states to ratify, and then 2/3 of the state legislatures to kind of sign on and say, yes, we do support the constitutional amendment. I believe we've had 27 amendments. Latest one was in 1970s. Well, the voting rights, lowering the voting rights, the voting age from 21 to 18. There might have been an amendment after that. We've had about 27, I believe. Anyhow, the strict constructionist interpreters of the Constitution were Thomas Jefferson, George Mason, John Taylor, some familiar names. And they cite 5 people, and they said only that Taylor could be described as pro-slavery, and even he regarded it as sort of what inherited misfortune that really shouldn't be tolerated, or something that could be tolerated but not celebrated. So, the Founding Fathers, they weren't fanatical fans of slavery. Thomas Jefferson, a little bit of hypocrisy. I'm a big fan of Jefferson, but now there's all this kind of slander out there that wants to say, oh, he fathered an illegitimate black child with one of his slaves that worked in the household. Well, I don't know if there's any truth to that. It could be kind of politically incorrect, opinionated history that's trying to kind of defame the good name of Thomas Jefferson. He was a little bit of a hypocrite. He criticized slavery himself, and even the Polish, great Polish general, I believe it was Tadeusz Kościuszko, or Kazimierz Pulaski, and I believe it was Kościuszko who wrote an impassioned letter to Jefferson saying that, could you please free the slaves, and I think he even provided money for Jefferson to dole out to the slaves once they were freed. Well, Jefferson didn't do that. I think he waited until his deathbed to release the slaves. So a little bit of a hypocrite. He didn't really think slavery was morally right. Nonetheless, has slaves, but that's not what I'm focusing on here. Okay, and here was the big, the first, what you see in 1798 was the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. John Adams was president, and what they did, this was the first kind of, the pre-NDAA, could you say, the pre-Patriot Act. What they did, the Federalists were the governing party at the time, and I can see that the Federalists were kind of the Alexander Hamiltonian school, kind of more, we're for big government. Anti-Federalists, Jefferson and his protégés, we are for smaller, limited government, states' rights. All right, and what the Alien and Sedition Acts did, in a nutshell, was to punish anybody who spoke in a treasonous manner against the president or the government. It essentially restricted free speech, forbade free speech, and said, okay, if you're convicted of sedition, we'll throw you in a federal prison. Well, people like Jefferson were alarmed by this, and many states were alarmed by this, and two of several states who took an active role in trying to fight against this: Kentucky and Virginia. Virginia, Jefferson's home state. The Kentucky resolutions. They were essentially, he writes in the book, a constitutional remedy, which was basically a solution that was just short of secession or violent revolution, but it was really meant to peacefully oppose the laws of the Alien and Sedition Acts. That it was essentially kind of nullify this whole nullification concept, to nullify the Alien and Sedition Acts. Promoted people like Daniel Webster, Massachusetts Senator, Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story, later Abraham Lincoln, big government Lincoln here, the guy who has trampled all over our great American Constitution. They subscribed to the kind of nationalist theory that the Constitution was not a compact among sovereign states. It was just merely a document that was kind of uniting a centralized governmental structure. Government essentially had great power over the states. That was not what they intended in the Constitution and beforehand Articles of Confederation. But basically, the Kentucky Resolutions of 1798 nullified that. They challenged the authority of the federal government. And now, thankfully, in the states, you're seeing great people like Ken Cuccinelli in Virginia, Attorney General running for governor in 2013, who are centerpieces in the fight against Obamacare and trying to nullify it. You use that principle of states' rights enumerated in the Constitution. It's such a key component of the Constitution. And you're seeing even the NDAA and the whole concept of drones over American cities. And that's another story for another time. But you're seeing these states kind of nullify these terrible, terrible things. Also, it goes on in the chapter about how South Carolina nullified the tariffs. Like I said previously, the southern states did so much of their trade with Great Britain and European countries. That's where they got most of their imports from. The North was heavily industrialized, factories, and the North was actually much wealthier in terms of GDP and everything than it was the South. Okay, and very much industrialized, many factories. That's where everything kind of the big hubs of industry kind of were centered in the North. The South, agriculture, plantations. And so where would they get their manufactured goods, clothing? Where would they get it from? Well, they didn't import much of it from Great Britain. Well, okay, and then a big nullificationist guy from South Carolina by the name of John C. Calhoun, he and the people of South Carolina challenged the concept of these tariffs that were being enforced, that government was trying to enforce all across the nation. And this was really what Lincoln, he wouldn't budge from this. He said, we are a nationalistic entity, the United States, and we believe in tariffs. We believe on taxes on the goods coming into the country to kind of promote American industry, genuine American industry. But this was really, really detrimental to the South. It would really jack up the prices for the goods the Southerners bought, and they were essential that the Southerners used. And South Carolina, again, tried nullifying the tariffs. Well, when the rest of the states decided to kind of nullify they took it a step ahead of nullifying. They seceded from the Union, starting with South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, the other states. I believe a total of 11 states seceded in December, starting in December 1860. And formed the Confederate States of America with Jeff Davis as the president. Well, they said, okay, that the federal government's oppressiveness and the way they're treating us, they're completely disregarding the type of economy that we have in the South. They do not understand our culture, our values. We want to preserve that. We have constitutional precedent that allows us to do this, to peacefully secede. And they did peacefully secede. There's controversy on who really fired first at Fort Sumter. Well, that's not even important, who fired the first shot. Because, Lincoln was hell-bent on preserving the Union, preserving this big entity that he wanted to promote, big government, tight federal government control over all of the states, limit states' rights, or virtually destroy states' rights. And slavery only became a small part of that. Tariffs was the big issue. States' rights was the big issue. The slavery was only a small part of this whole concept. And like I said, um, um, you know, Civil War is really a fascinating topic that we'll discuss further. And ladies and gentlemen, wow, it's already been an hour, and I didn't even get close. I got like maybe 1/10 of the way through the Political Guide to American History. So what I have to do is kind of next time better prepare for the show and kind of get some notes down. So I'm really concise, and really we can get a lot more material covered. Of course, I had to do some advertising for my good friend Adam, and for my the congressional candidate running in my district. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Chris Lesiak signing off on the Lesiak Report. Thank you very much for listening.